From the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talking Catholic Time with your co-hosts, Marianela Nunez and Mike Walsh. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great, Marianela. For our listeners, we're recording this on Thursday, December 17th, where we've just had the first recorded record snowfall in 1,001 days in the Philadelphia area. First notable snowfall in 1,001 days. And I was so happy while it was first snowing, and then it turned to sleet and rain, and then I wasn't happy anymore. But I got a couple of hours of snow, and I was very happy with it.
Wasn't it so beautiful to see the snow falling and, being able to just be home with a cup of coffee?
It really was. I am definitely a winter guy, not a summer guy. And as you can tell from my complexion, I'm a winter. But it is. I was so excited. I was at work when the snow hit, and they let us go early. And I love driving home in the snow. I love everything about the snow. Everything about it.
That's weird. You love driving in the snow?
Oh, yeah. I love driving in the snow. I don't like driving with other drivers in the snow, but I love driving in the snow. It's a blast for me.
That's a skill,
It is. Anyway, so Marianela, it's when we have you on, we always know it's going to be one of two topics, and today it's schools. And we're very excited about that because we haven't had a schools podcast in quite some time. And we haven't had our guest here since, I think, end of September, beginning of October. And I think it's a good time to chat about Catholic schools again as we're coming to the end of the 2020 portion of the school year, about to jump into the 2021 school year next year. And we'll be having Catholic Schools Week at the end of January. So I'm always very excited about that. So it's good times. It's good times.
Yeah, right? we haven't done anything in the podcast, but as you know, we have been very hard in the school's office to make sure that our children continue to be educated in the Catholic school tradition, in person or remote, whatever we can do to keep that education going and moving forward. So it's been a really blessed year to actually see what we're doing. It's kind of like quite impressive. I feel very proud of our schools and of the office these days, Mike. Yeah,
I know. We haven't had anybody on from the schools department or really schools in general. It's because everybody's so busy, which is always a wonderful thing to see. But it's also, shows a lot of the success in our schools. So, amidst all the COVID and everything like that. So, Marianela, do you want to introduce our beloved guest?
Of course. And so today we have with us our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Bill Watson. It's always great to have him on our podcast, and we are happy to welcome him back. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Marianela, and thank you for the very, very kind welcome. It's great to be here on the podcast again.
We love to have you.
As anyone could tell, the one upside of the first snowfall in 1,001 days is we are all remote today. So we're doing this as a Zoom call, so you may notice our sound quality is not what I usually prefer, but which is such a shame because, as everyone knows, Dr. Watson has a voice for radio. He has these great. We use him for radio when we have to record radio ads. We use him all the time, and I must say, Zoom does not give him any credit, but it's still wonderful to have him on, regardless of how his voice sounds.
Well, thanks, Mike. Your face for radio still also comes through on Zoom, though. I just want to make sure,
Very, very true. Very true.
For the listeners who haven't looked at Mike's face, I guess the reference you just said about you have a snow or winter face, it's the white hair or something, Mike?
Yes, there's a lot of white hair on it, too. That certainly makes it a winter as well. At any rate, Bill, it's always great to have you on. And, the first question I think we're going to ask, is we had you on a couple of times in the summer and early in the school year to talk about schools, mostly to talk about schools in COVID times. So I guess my first question to you, and obviously I know the answer to this question, but for our listeners, is how are the schools doing?
The schools are doing great, Mike. Today is the 68th day of the school year. And usually in mid-December, we don't have that count. or at least I don't, day by day. But we're in this, very unique situation this year where each school day is, as it always is, a blessing. And I think we appreciate that blessing more than ever because we're able to gather. Most of us are able to gather in person to learn, and where we took that for granted before, we truly appreciate it more and more this year. On the other hand, each one of those days, I think each of us is happy to see end. Because that means that's another day that we've done it. That's another day that we've had the kids in school, safe and healthy and learning. And the extra effort and the added efforts and maybe even level of exhaustion by the end of the day, certainly for the teachers and for the principals and for the students themselves, has passed for that day. So we're sort of happy to see it end, but then look forward to the next day to get together.
Well, I'll tell you, what's nice is the three of us all have kids in Catholic school at various grade levels. And I left mine. Mine is in remote learning today because they made the decision when it was looking like it was going to be fairly substantial snowfall. They were like, well, you know what, let's just move to remote learning for a day, a half day of remote learning so that the kids could still have fun in the snow. And nice. And what I tell you, I was truly impressed with it because my son Jack was able to make that change like that. He was like, my wife went over to him. He says, no, don't forget, Jack, your class has started. I said, Mom, I know exactly what I need to do. Don't worry about it. And it was great because he's, God bless him, he has been in school every day, hasn't missed a single day of school so far this year. And but all of it has been in school. Which I will admit that early on in the spring of last school year, he did truly seem to enjoy pajama wearing every single day while he was in class. But being in school around all of his friends has really been great for him this year. And but having that knowledge of how to switch back to remote learning was kind of nice. So it's which I think, as I recall, that was one of the benefits of everything that we went through. I mean, sort of it's called a silver lining of everything we went through is all the parents, all the schools, all the teachers seem to be very prepared to make a rapid change to remote learning when necessary.
Yeah.
And we've done that, Mike. So certainly today, a lot of schools, perhaps to the students and the parents' chagrin or dislike, are actually still in session because we can be. But we've also, for other reasons, had to transition to remote temporarily in a couple of schools. So just give an example. In one case, we had an individual who had tested positive for COVID and had tested positive for COVID due to a contact outside of school. I want to emphasize it was not, a contact in school. But because that person was a potential close contact of multiple people and multiple teachers in the school, you had a number of teachers who were out in the middle school, and so all grades 6, 7, and 8 transitioned to remote, and they did it they turned on a dime, and everybody knew where to be the next morning. They logged in live at 8:30, or maybe it was 8:20 at that particular school. And they went to their classes, and this was middle school. So they sort of logged out of one class and logged into the next because they went from reading to math and then to social studies and so on. And the transition was really smooth for that school and for all the schools that have had to do something similar. So part of the reason that they're able to do that is that after last year, we learned a couple of things after, last March, one of which was if we have to be remote for any reason temporarily, we want to make sure that it follows the school day as much as possible. Now that varies a little bit for a first grader than it does for a seventh grader or a high schooler, but we want it to follow the day, keep to that schedule, because we learned that schedule is so critical. I mean, we knew this, but we didn't quite know how to do it. To your point, we didn't quite know how to do it in remote. So, but that school day is so critical. The structure, what time is math? What are the routines for the younger kids? looking outside at the weather, saying prayers at the regular time, those routines. And so we're able now, every one of the schools, having learned that from last year, has kind of ramped up their internet capabilities to be able to utilize both the hardware at the school, but also the infrastructure of, say, a Google Classroom or a Google Meets to have those live classes. And so that's what's happening today across the diocese, where kids are sort of transitioning right away to kind of logging in live. And the teachers, I think they've made the most dramatic changes of all, and really to their great credit. They have learned how to use those software tools and invite kids into the classroom remotely, because we do have parents who's chosen a remote option for their kids. And so for the whole year, they maybe the children or someone in the home is particularly high risk for COVID, for complications from COVID. And so they want to really be as conservative as they can in protecting the health of that person, whether it's the child or their parent or somebody else. Anyway, so they're at home on remote. And so what the teachers have been doing from the beginning of the year is teaching simultaneously in the classroom, sort of with the camera on. So imagine yourself kind of at the front of the classroom with, 15 kids in front of you. And then there's your computers on your podium, and there's five kids' faces on the podium. So now managing, who's in the classroom and who's online, and then making sure that the assignments that are distributed, if it's, a hard copy of something, making sure that the kids at home have a copy of it, or transitioning so that everybody does it on a computer, where we're fortunate enough to have one-to-one devices. So the teachers have made this tremendous change with so much effort. And they're doing just a remarkable job of it. I mean, I mentioned before, it's exhausting at the end of a day. And that's part of the reason why. And so because of that, and the teachers are so nimble with all of the technology and the transition to remote, that they're able to tell the students exactly what's needed from them. And the students can kind of follow suit.
I can talk about that a little bit, just because you mentioned, how the teachers are teaching remotely and in person at the same time. And I've had the experience of both because of myself having to quarantine a couple of times, just to make sure that, there's no COVID around, and to protect everybody else in the school and at work. I've been sort of like working from home and doing the remote learning experience. And, I can say that the teachers are doing such an amazing job to make sure that the kids that are on remote are really part of the experience. And, my 5-year-old who's in kindergarten at Resurrection, it's able to say, oh, we have to be remote. Oh, I know how to do that. I totally know how to do that. She's so confident. And, we get all the resources from school that she needs, and she's able to work simultaneously with the class, doing what they're doing and participating. So it's fun to watch, the teacher ask questions about the lesson that they're doing, and the other kids are responding. And then my daughter Mariana would be responding when she's prompted to respond, and the other kids are able to listen to her and say, hey, Mariana, that was great. Or, it's kind of like something that a lot of people thought was impossible, that teachers, because of their commitment and their work, are really making it happen. So it's really impressive.
Yeah, it really is. I've been in the schoolroom visiting a couple of times for work, where I've seen that the interaction of having the laptop on the podium, and it's mind blowing in many regards. But at the same time, I really like the seamlessness that they've been able to do it. Bill, do you have a sense, in terms of grades and, quality of curriculum? Do you have a sense yet that all of the guidelines have been put in place so that we can have school and these remote learning options? Do you have a sense yet that the quality of the education has maintained itself versus the old days?
Yeah, we do. I would say for the in-person students, well, let me just sort of state our preference, or our position. At the beginning of the year, we made a commitment, actually at the end of last year, based on feedback from parents, that we wanted to have students in school as often as possible for as long as possible, as long as we could do it safely. Mm-hmm. And I could talk to the safety part about it, next if you like, but that was the commitment. And part of the commitment to that was, on the one hand, certainly the parents were very much desiring that. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's generally understood that in-person learning, particularly for the younger students, is preferable to remote learning. I mean, remote learning is a workable emergency application, and it's like we've said, it's to the great credit of all involved that they've been able to implement remote learning, like you said, as quickly as possible. On the flip side, I think that teachers agree, and parents probably agree, that in-person learning is really the best. Not only because of the just kind of being in that environment is less distracting. It's more academic, if you will. It's a little bit intangible, but a lot of students need a lot of scaffolding, which is an educational term for guidance. They need somebody to kind of help them understand, this is what we're doing now. They need that structure, and that structure really situates them well for learning. As I said before, we've replicated that fairly well. I think about as well as you can in a digital environment, but it only goes so far. So I would say that by and large, the in-person experience has been on par with what we have experienced, or what parents have expected. And the remote experience, I think, has been far better than it was last spring, even though we got very, very good responses from parents at how well we did last spring. And I think it is about as solid as it can be in terms of the academic experience. To be very honest, I think it depends on, there's a lot more variables if you're learning remotely. So if you're at home and you don't have a clear distraction-free space to work, that's going to impact your academics. If your internet connection is not reliable, that's going to impact your academics. And then there's those intangible things, the sort of back and forth that happen between a teacher and students, and the transition times when you might be taking a break that you don't get to take advantage of if you're in person, that I think count. We think, every minute counts in a school. We have such precious time with students that every minute counts. And if you lose some of those minutes, maybe you lose some of the impact. But I think, again, remote learning, if we have to do it, is a workable emergency solution. And that's one of the reasons why from the beginning we've said, again, if we can be in school safely, we will be, because we do believe that in-person learning for most students is better for them.
Well, that's good to hear. The fact that so many students have been able to remain in class this year is really is really owes all of its credit to the fact that the schools were able to open. And, I think a conversation we had early on was, how quickly were the students going to be able to adapt to being in class again, and the separation, the masks, the barriers around the desks. And, as a jaded person who has faith in very little when it comes to human beings, I wasn't so sure that it was going to go, how long it was going to take to go smoothly. I was stunned at how quickly the kids got used to it. I mean, Jack, I don't think even blinked an eye at it.
Yeah, it's they just kind of stepped right in and got going. The one thing we were all kind of concerned about was the masks. right? So, masks are one of the, we believe one of the most effective ways to protect each other. And the mask largely protects others from you if you have the virus and you don't know that you have it, right? So, but we were worried, right, that 6-year-old kids were going to be grabbing at the mask, pulling it off, itching, like, I can't do this. They have no problem. Most of them, right, have no problem with it. I mean, you mentioned Jack. I have a first grader and 2 pre-K students, and they put their mask on in the car on the way to school, and it just stays on. So that, I think they're so adaptable that way. And there are other rules too. You're standing further away from kids in the line to the bathroom. You're in your seat more. That's hard for kids. It's taken away. I mean, I think for the teachers have had to adapt the way they teach, because one of the ways that learning is social. You're talking to other kids. You're in a group with other kids. Well, we got to be as far apart. When you have to be as far apart from those kids as possible, that kind of takes away some of that. So the teachers have been, really creative about getting the kids outside so that they can be in a group, and kind of talk a little bit louder and have the space to spread out from each other, but still be in a group. Obviously, today would not be a good day for that. But they've been very, very adaptable, and the kids have been, extremely adaptable as well. And they've just kind of adapted to, I don't want to call it the new normal, because I'd like to think that it's the temporary normal. But they've adapted to the temporary normal, at least for what school looks like this year, quite well.
I was thinking, we talked a couple of times about the importance of being in school. And when a lot of the school shutdowns occurred in the spring, there was, on the part of governments, there was what I felt like a rush and a wise rush to shut them down, because we just didn't know back then. And in the fall and winter, soon to be winter, as we've seen rises in cases in not necessarily in our schools, but in the outside world, we've seen that most of the governments have been very reticent to shut down schools, because I get the impression that it's, even though bringing people together is considered something to we shouldn't be doing during COVID times, that it was outweighed by the importance of being together in school. From your perspective, I think we always have this lingering thought, certainly New Jersey going to shut down schools again? And it seems to me like there really hasn't been, from the government's perspective anyway, a push to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So I keep saying to people that, we didn't know how this year was going to go. And we were prepared, as we've talked about, for different options. And what we've learned, and this is true in the South Jersey Catholic schools, and it's true in schools across New Jersey, across the country, and across the world, that schools do not appear to be places that are contributing to the spread of the virus outside of school. So we have said, I have said a number of times in this podcast that we want the kids to be in school, or our goal is for the kids to be in school for as long as possible, so long as they can be safely. And so there's really 2 things that would cause us to transition to remote, temporarily for as long as we needed to. The first is that if we had any evidence that COVID was spreading within the school, right? So, and we work very, very closely with the local departments of health. So in New Jersey, the county department of health has a great deal of authority to help locally schools and other agencies, make decisions. And so we work very closely every time that a principal is informed that someone in the school community has COVID. We work very closely for contact tracing with the local Department of Health, and determine, do they know where they got it, right? Is it clear? Is there a clear sort of line of contagion, so to speak? And we have not seen, we have not seen that line of contagion is in schools. if we had evidence that it was, and again, we have got the local, it's not us making that call. It's the local Department of Health saying, look, you have 2 cases, for example, where they don't know where they got it and they're both in school. So it's possible they got it from each other in school. One of them had it and somebody gave it to each other and somebody else in school. In New Jersey, that's considered an outbreak, right? Two or more cases where you don't know where it came from. And we haven't had that. So we haven't had that in our schools. What if we do, then I think that's cause to transition to remote learning for 2 weeks, 14 days, so that anybody who may have contracted the virus, we would see it, the incubation period's over, and, and so forth. So we haven't seen that. What we have seen is we have seen people come to school with COVID, or they sort of learn that they have COVID, and they learn after they've already kind of been in school. And then we work again with the Department of Health, and we quarantine those people who are around them as a matter of protocol, as a matter of recommended protocol and safety. Now, the interesting thing about that is that the kids, for the most part, are 6 feet away from each other, and they're wearing masks, and the teachers for that matter, but we still quarantine them out of what might call an abundance of caution. And when we've seen that, we've tracked those quarantines as well, and we don't see that those people who are quarantined are getting COVID as a matter of having been, connected to one of the individuals in school. So as I mentioned, in one of the cases where we had to transition to remote, we did that because a lot of people were close contacts, but none of them ended up getting COVID. But once you have a certain number of people out of school, then it kind of makes more sense to be remote because you have more people out than in, or the teachers can't come in. And that's the second scenario in which we would transition to remote. So we could either transition to remote if we did see evidence of spread, or if it just became, there were so many cases around us that people got it at home from their brother, their sister, their mom, their dad, their cousin, somebody. And you had enough of those that there were so many people in the school community that it made more sense to be remote, just to kind of ease the pressure on the system, that you can't get substitutes, or there's have more kids out of the class than in the class, and so forth. And that's been our experience here in South Jersey Catholic schools so far. Like I said, that's been the experience. There's good research that is coming out about schools, and schools, given the protections that we have in place, being safe places for students to be at this time, and being safe places for students to be because of the mitigating factors. So for us, if we can provide these, and because we have been able to provide these safe places for kids without putting too much of a strain on the system, without having too many kids out because they have to quarantine due to a contact outside of school, or teachers who have to quarantine due to a contact out of school, or that kind of thing, then like I said, we believe that in-person learning is the best, and so we pursue that. So we're going to keep watching that. We do every day. We watch the COVID cases as they come in. We have those conversations with the local departments of health, and we monitor the pressure, frankly, on the system, on the teachers, on the kids who are in school, on the parents, and that kind of thing. And the principals make informed decision based on those factors.
So thank you. I want to note that we have another guest joining us momentarily, but before we bring him in, I have 3 more questions for you, Bill, that I specifically wanted to talk about. Number one is, when this year is over, is there any chance that the schools are going to track sick days of this school year versus past school years, just to see if we've noticed a drop in sick days because of all of the protections? So nobody's getting the flu, nobody's getting the common cold.
Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of. I'm fascinated with that stuff, right? So I certainly think we'll have fewer sick days. People, and again, I want to sort of give credit to the parents. They are keeping their kids home when they're sick. Whether it turns out to be COVID, which in the majority of cases it does not, they're still keeping their kids home when they're sick. They have a sore throat, they have a runny nose, so those things are kind of still happening. So I don't know how that would work out. I think on the one hand, we would maybe see an increase in sick days next year because there would be more of that. going around. But maybe we'd see a decrease because you wouldn't have as many sick days associated with, really being vigilant about COVID. I will say that I think, in the future, there are some things that we've learned about mitigating sickness in a school environment. Every year the flu goes through a school or two, or, you have a stomach bug or something like that. I could see a future in which, hey, it's not so bad to have the kids 6 feet apart from each other in the classroom. It's not so bad to wear masks in the times when they're close together, because that keeps people healthy, whether it's COVID or not. Again, we're a long way off from that at this point, but I'm just kind of throwing that out there since you raised the question of sick days.
Mike, just before you go to your second question, can I just add, I have to say that Bill has become such an expert in the field of COVID right now. I think he could add that to his resume, to his research, because we have so much data. He's a numbers guy and he's, collecting all this data that I wouldn't be surprised if he comes up with a study regarding what happened in schools during COVID times, because, he's done the work, he's done the research, kept the numbers and has all this data. So I just, wanted to say that.
Oh, I'm already expecting that he's either going to write an academic research paper or at least a white paper on it, because I'm very much looking forward to it from our good doctor. The two other things was, one, how has sports been affected at both the elementary level and the high school level? I do think winter sports at the high school level were shut down by the state, but I'm just curious how does sports look like scholastically right now?
Yeah, so the high schools follow the direction of the New Jersey Athletic Association, the NJSIAA, Interscholastic Sports Association. I always forget what the acronym is for, but they run the sports in the state. And so the high schools have followed that, and they have very strict protocols for who can practice, when, where, in what circumstances, how many, that were very helpful for that. So at the moment, sports are shut down indoor sports are shut down in New Jersey, and that took place it sort of took hold in the beginning of December. So we're waiting to see what that will look like, as we get to January and beyond. A lot of the sports were postponed to the spring, so I think we'll probably see, those that can be done outdoors will be. Maybe there are safer conditions for sports to be conducted indoors and that sort of thing. At the elementary level, we made the decision. The principals, collaborated on a decision early in the school year to say that we allowed fall sports because they were largely outdoors to practice, but not compete, because we did not want to have gatherings of cohorts from different schools come together. For winter sports, we postponed them. So because they're all indoors in Catholic elementary schools, and they necessarily involve people running around in an enclosed space in close contact, right? No matter, think of basketball. It's a very physical sport. There's not social distance in basketball, So we postponed. I think we're postponing, hopeful that we'll be able to do some version of a sports season for basketball and girls volleyball in the spring, and if we can find outdoor locations to do that, so much the better. We don't know what the condition of the virus will be at that point, but they're kind of on hold in a word. Okay.
And then my last question for you, Bill, before we bring in our second guest, is spirituality. That was something that we're Catholic schools, and our faith is one of the central points of what it is to go to a Catholic school. I'm just curious from a faith perspective, both in the shutdowns or the switch to remote learning in the spring, but including this year where gathering has been in large groups has been difficult. How is the spiritual nature of our schools been able to remain intact?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say it's sort of on a very baseline level. It starts with prayer, and And that prayer in a Catholic school is acknowledging our dependence on God. It's acknowledging the presence of God in our classrooms and with each other. And as I've said, wherever two or more are gathered in His name, He is there with us. And I think that counts for Zoom too. We're gathered. I don't think that has to be a physical presence. We're talking about God after all here. So we start every day with prayer, and every class starts with prayer. And so we're able to do that. And the students who are remote are able to engage in prayer. We're teaching religion, and the religion classes are often a place where you have pretty good conversation among students, among kids, about the teachings of the faith. And those conversations, as you can imagine, look different for a second grade than they do for an eighth grader or a seventh grader preparing for confirmation, or a second grader preparing for first Holy Communion. But they're happening, and they're happening in person, and they're happening virtually. The one thing I would say too is, we believe the Catholic schools are communities of faith. We are faith communities, and faith communities, we do believe, operate better in person. Kind of think of your own experience with Mass. Being kind of in situ in the church, in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, is different from attending Mass online. So attending Mass online is drawing you into the community in a way that's different from if you weren't at Mass at all, right? So it's a good emergency solution. But we do believe that's one of the reasons why we're so fortunate and feel blessed to be able to gather in community, is that most of the students are able to just be in community with each other. And so that the spirituality and the Catholicity of the school comes through in the interactions. It comes through in the interactions that we guide the students to have with each other. It comes through in the care and for the students that the teachers have, and their interactions with them. And so the teachers are able to have those interactions, of course, with students who are virtual, in addition to those who are in the classroom. But as I mentioned before, there's that sort of presence of being in Christian community that occurs in the classroom. That's so important. And so I do believe that's an important part of why I believe parents wanted their students in school. One of the important parts about why we continue to strive for that. And I believe we've been able to maintain and sustain that even in these times.
That's great, Bill. I tend to agree. I certainly miss. I certainly miss our school masses. Are always one of the things that I enjoy going to is my job as a director of communication, live streaming photographs, whatever we're doing there. So I do look forward to that coming back. But I am glad to hear that the schools are still be able to maintain their spiritual nature even in COVID times.
And just to that point, real quick, Mike, the schools, many of the schools are still having school Mass, but what they're doing is, say, in September, the eighth grade attends live in the church, and everybody else watches the Mass live streamed in their class. So they're not in the church, but they're experiencing it as a community. And then in, say, October, the seventh grade goes live, and then the sixth grade, so. And some of the schools are even doing more masses than usual, so that every class can get in. So they are finding ways to continue to those traditions and those important components of the spirituality as well.
And the other piece is that, as you know, like our faith in our Catholic schools is embedded in everything we do. So you can see it in the classes and what they do in religion as what they do in language arts. So that's what our teachers are about, making sure that the curriculum is permeated by our values in a deep way, so that the students do not only get to experience their faith when they go to Mass, but it's part of who we are as a whole.
So Marianela, we have another guest with us today. And so we're going to switch into some conversation about curriculum, and then we're going to end it with a little conversation on enrollment. But as we hit the curriculum stage, who's our newest guest?
So we had a surprise in store for you people who are listening to Talking Catholic today. And with us is Dr. Robert Lockwood, who is the new Director of Curriculum and Assessment for the Diocese of Camden and South Jersey Catholic Schools. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry I'm a little late. It's an odd day with weather, and I have a 16-month-old, and my wife works from home, and my in-laws are here trying to watch. So it's listening families understand the challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you needn't worry. You've worked with Dr. Watson now for quite a while. He knows how to fill some space. So when we're talking. So I guess, from a curriculum standpoint, our Catholic schools, for years, it's been one of the things we've been able to sort of hang our hat on is the great curriculum that our Catholic schools have. Now you came to us from the lovely Diocese of Metuchen, who actually, in an irony, in about 45 minutes, I'm going to be doing a podcast with their podcasters at the Diocese of Metuchen. So I'll be everything. But from a curriculum perspective, what's it been like this year, making sure that the schools were able to maintain the high level of learning that we expect?
Yeah, thanks. Something I'm mindful of is Bill said to me when I was first starting here, he said, "You're getting on a moving train and we're going." And that's essentially what it was like. I'm grateful to say that a lot of the work to prepare the schools for remote learning was a lot of it was in place, and I came in and helped them continue that work, the great work. For example, I think one of the main differences was when we pivoted schools overall toward remote learning in the spring, March of 2020. We did it by the seat of our pants. In some cases, we were doing the best we could and weren't sure what was happening or how long we were going to be out. So that left a lot of questions. This time, I think we were far more prepared for the contingency of potential of being out. And so we were able to provide enough resources to not just our teachers, but to our principals for the benefit of the students. A lot of that involves great professional development so that teachers can provide the best blended learning environment possible. And so, for example, some schools and teachers in particular might have already been using G Suite or Google Classroom, for example, or Schoology, some of those other learning management systems to help students and providing them with the content and the information from their courses. But some might not have been as comfortable with it. So it was a matter of making sure that they had all the resources they needed. So, for example, we invested for all the teachers in something called Link Spring. And that was an opportunity for teachers to get on their own time or in a school as a faculty meeting or in their PLCs, their professional learning communities, in order to enrich themselves and learn more on their own time. And it's an online program, and it has helpful videos of how-tos on blended learning overall. So if you're doing, again, maybe they're using Google Classroom or, in many cases, we have students, about 10% of students when we first started are remote across the schools. We had some schools with 5% of students. We had some schools with 25% of students who were remote. So that presented a challenge for teachers in trying to figure out, how do I teach to the students who are in front of me in person and to the students who are joining typically via Zoom or Google Meets, and trying to manage all of that. So we provided as much professional development as possible for the teachers so that they could do that. And it's been difficult. We're not going to lie. I think overall the teachers, what I told a lot of them was, I said, pretend you're a first year teacher again. You have to learn things all over again. And for me, my first year teaching, it was terrible. And because you're learning and you don't know what you're doing necessarily. And, you're writing lesson plans the night before and you don't know what's going to happen because you haven't experienced it before. So in some cases, our teachers felt like that and they were doing it because they didn't know. But I must say that they're hardest on themselves. And they wanted it to be perfect because they wanted to provide the normal experience for the kids that they do in any other year. So I know they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And a lot of times I had to say, just give yourself a break. We're doing the best we can and you're doing fantastic. And the parents agreed, because we do quite a bit of surveys, as Bill can tell you, with families and what they think and how things are going. And it's working out very well. So I think that's a testament to our teachers and what they're doing. And back to linking this to your original question about curriculum, I think what's most helpful, and the teachers have expressed, the work that Bill did prior to me coming on board when he was director of curriculum with the curriculum committees through the ACE program in Notre Dame. They built the standards in the curriculum for each content area so that it had the flexibility in order to adjust and adapt to remote learning in this environment. So I'm grateful to all the work those folks did and those committees because I think that has also helped with the success that we've seen overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm curious. Oftentimes our curriculum, not that it's necessarily geared towards standardized testing, but I know it takes a nod to standardized testing that we'll do for the Iowas and the SATs at the high school level. What is the plan for standardized testing in this school year, both at an elementary level and at a high school level?
Yeah, thanks. So we've been continuing our standardized assessment that we use. We use a progress monitoring tool called STAR. It's through Renaissance, and that was implemented a few years ago. And this is actually the first year that it was implemented in grades 1 through 8. Before it was in a few different grades, 2, 3, 7, I believe, and maybe 8. But so we did it for all of the grade levels. And I had plenty of conversations with Renaissance, the parent company of STAR, the test that we give. And one of the advantages of the STAR is that it's for a class period. I mean, you're really talking about 20, 30 minutes for an assessment in math and then 20 or 30 minutes for assessment in reading. So that can be done during a class period. I mean, long days are past of the 4 or 5 hour tests where students have to sit all day. And the great thing is that it provides, even though it's shorter, these adaptive tests provide the same accuracy of students' knowledge base and for that test. And so we provided the test to all students in grades 1 through 8 this past fall in end of September and early October. So we had a few-week window. And I had long conversations with the test company about the validity and the reliability of students who were taking the tests at home. What we essentially had to do is shift our thinking and saying that, well, these students are going to be home. They're going to be taking online assessments for their teachers, typically probably through Google Forms, for example. Some teachers are using that or whatever other method. And the test is able to be given to remote learners, and it has been. So interestingly enough, there are lots of studies out there, and I'll call them projections when this all started, about this, what we called the COVID slide is what it was termed, and this learning loss that was expected among students. And they were projecting that, students were going to lose far more information than they do when they are out for summer vacation, for example. And so we wanted to find out, is that true or not? And we compared our data from the January of 2020 to fall of 2020 to look at students and how they did. And we did see some differences, primarily in the 2, 3, 4th grades, some of those primary grade levels, where students, particularly in the area of math, there were some differences. They didn't do as well as they had in the past, but we need to put that in some context. We had more students taking the test this time around, so we don't have data necessarily to compare for all students across the time. It was a different environment. Some students were doing it remotely, and so we had to get some kinks out of that, and learning how to do it. And then do I think that we had some students who maybe struggled a little bit between some of the work that they did in the spring of 2020 when we were out until now? I think there's some factors of that as well. But overall, the point was to get the information so that the teachers can use it to adapt their instruction for students. And make sure that they were meeting their needs, what we call differentiation of instruction. So while we did see differences, we can't necessarily say that that was completely due to COVID. But more importantly, we're able to take that information and move forward. The teachers are able to use that. And so what we're doing, we give the test 3 times a year. It's going to be happening again at the end of January, and then we give it again in May so we can track their progress. We actually have just decided, you had mentioned Iowa, and that's been used for many years by the Diocese of Camden Catholic Schools. We have just decided that we're going to suspend Iowa testing for this year, primarily because Iowa is a paper-based test, and it's a little complex depending on what's going to be happening related to COVID. We do have a number of students, as I said, who are currently remote. How do we give a paper-based test to them and ensure the integrity of it? That's a little challenging. And so then do we give it to just the students who are in class? I'm not sure what that's going to really provide us if we can't do everybody. And then it's a real possibility that we could have some schools, as Bill had mentioned earlier, that might be out because they're quarantined, or we just don't, there's too many unknowns right now as it relates to what March of 2021 is going to look like. And that's when we typically give Iowa. So we're suspending it for the year. But as I said, the good news is we're still doing the STAR assessment, and we get a lot of great data from that.
Well, that's great. And at the high school level, is there any changes with SATs?
No, actually, I worked high school for years, and I was an SAT coordinator, and they continue to give the SAT and the PSAT in person. And it's, for the most part, all the information that I've seen, they've been doing it, and they've been doing it pretty well. They haven't had any issues. They've had to continue the same practices that the schools are currently using, which is social distancing and wearing masks and the shields in the classrooms. So students are as safe as ever.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, Dr. Lockwood. I really do appreciate all the detail. My son will be thrilled that he's not taking the Iowa tests. So, Dr. Watson, with regard to enrollment, we get questions from the media all the time. Did everyone flock to Catholic schools for enrollment? But we actually have 2 things to talk about with enrollment. One, how is our enrollment doing? And 2, who's leading our enrollment processes?
Sure. So I'll answer the first question first. All enrollment matters are mostly local. So they, the answer is it depends on the school. So we had some schools that really saw a very big increase in their enrollment this year. We believe, and they've reported to us, as parents have reported to them, because there were parents who really wanted that in-person experience for their students. And so there are a lot of people who were sort of maybe on the fence about coming to Catholic school that provided an opportunity for them to come to Catholic school. And so by and large, we hear from them that they've had a great experience so far. And so now we're sort of working on the re-enrollment for next year. And so we look forward to, they've had a great experience. And so we look forward to them kind of extending that. There are other schools that capped their enrollment actually because of the size of their classrooms and the size of their class already. So they literally had to measure how many desks could be in the classroom. And so they intentionally capped their enrollment to balance the priority for parents who want Catholic education for their children with the priority for safety for everybody. So that's been a balance. So we're looking forward to the re-enrollment period this year. So that gets to the second question. The Office of Catholic School does provide support for enrollment. One of the areas where we have provided support, expertise, best practice, and so forth is in Latino enrollment. Our Latino enrollment has increased significantly over the past several years. And our very own Marianela Nunez has been spearheading that effort. And so as of the beginning of the next calendar year, so very, very shortly here, Marianela is being promoted to Director of Enrollment and Outreach. So
Congratulations, Marianela.
And
so you get a whole new list of headaches. Good job.
Yeah. So she's so good with parents and and their enrollment needs, and with communicating with principals about how best to walk with parents in their discernment. And she's done that with the Latino community. And so she's sort of leveraging that and expanding that influence over all of the enrollment programs. So we're very, very, very happy that she accepted that additional challenge.
That's wonderful, Marianela. I'm genuinely happy for you. Good job.
I'm so excited with the new role and hoping that, we can increase enrollment and be over with COVID and, get our schools full of students learning in the Catholic school tradition. So that's what we all want. And we want to keep our schools not only alive, but thriving, for many years to come.
Well, I can't wait to see all the great work that you do. I know how great you've been with Hispanic enrollment, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you do with enrollment with all of South Jersey. So thank you all for joining the podcast this week. And to all of our listeners, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll chat with you again next week. See you, everybody.